This is the Wednesday, November 5th, 2025 meeting of the Blue Ribbon Committee on the Municipal Building. And we'll quickly take the roll. We have Buzz Scher is not with us. Mark Newport, our police chief. John O'Leary is traveling. He may be phoning in if we get a phone call. Cameron Horak.
Present.
Yeah. Peter Weeks.
Here.
Mary Lou McElwin emailed us that she may attend by Zoom, and she's got a cold. Rick Chelman emailed us that he is in the midst of defending a client. So we have Renee Plummer here. And from staff, we have Carl Weber, Deputy City Manager, Peter Rice, DPW Director, Joe Almeida, Facilities Manager, and North, do you want to introduce the JSA team?
From JSA, North Sturtevant.
Oh,
Mike, sorry, and Mike Maloney as well.
oh, Mike is in the back.
He's hiding.
And we do not have City Manager Karen Connor.
Connor is not present.
Yes.
And Jackie Burnett is here. We are scribes.
We have Carl in her stead.
Yes. Okay. Take it away, North.
Okay. North Sturtevant, principal in charge with JSA Architects. With me is Richard Martz and Sandra Hodge in the Peanut Gallery. Those two have been working very hard with city staff to get their arms around the needs of the various departments in the city.
We do need to review and approve the minutes from October 1st.
So moved.
Second.
The changes, additions, deletions. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Sorry. Have it. Summary of JSA city staff work to date.
Yeah, so just to give you, you got a little bit of a preview in that, JSA will give an update on what they've done, and, especially on the city side. And also, we appreciated a lot of the conversation at the last meeting, so what we try to do is when there's a lot of conversation around things, if there's additional information we can provide at subsequent meetings, we do that, so you'll see that it'll include things about fleet building maintenance, some of the efficiency factors, and differences in the analysis of square foot needs, and some of the future of policing. So we really try to encompass, anytime you have some questions, our job is really to go back and find good answers to help add to the discussion, but also help provide where we're heading and what we're considering as part of the design. And so we'll have JSA give an update on the work today.
Great. I think we all understand the mayor's points that this work will be ongoing in the new year. That doesn't mean we loaf till the end of the year at all. Let's keep on the quick to that. But our challenge is to figure out how to get the police station and the needs met in this building while we renovate this building, all for the most efficient use of space.
Before Richard starts, I was very pleased to find that our approach, our collective approach towards this project is very much in line with what Mayor McEachern had to say, is that there's a large building here that has some inefficiencies. To the extent that we can maximize efficiencies in the existing municipal side of the building, keep calling it a side, that provides more opportunity to limit the amount of new construction while at the same time serving the needs of the department. So we're all chasing the same thing.
Renee?
Can I just ask a question? Where do you live?
Where do I live now? Elliott, Maine.
Where do you live?
I live in Dover.
And where does Rodney McManus live?
He lives in Florida.
And where do you live? Dover. Okay.
So
Everybody lives.
I work in Portsmouth. I have for 30 years. I lived in Portsmouth for 5 years.
Yeah.
I know all these people. I voted for a lot of these people, so I'm not a stranger to them.
Yeah. No, he just
Yeah, I just
wanted to be there. Okay.
Some work to date. So the
over the past month since we last met, the primary focus for our team has been on the municipal side, meeting with all the departments and.
you speak up?
I can. Over the past month, the primary focus for our team has been on the municipal side of things, meeting with almost all of the departments and starting to build that space needs assessment and start to figure out what's going to make that side tick. As Carl said, we also have followed up with some things on the police department side based off the conversation we had last meeting. So what we'd like to do is talk through some of that first, and then touch on where we stand on the municipal side and the takeaways we had there. So the sort of first agenda item there was the fleet building. We spoke quite a bit last meeting about what was in that building, what needed to be in that building, what opportunities do we have to get that down, because it was significantly larger than the facility we have to date. That was constructive prompting, and there were some good opportunities that came out of that in our follow-up conversations. One of the reasons for the building being larger, as proposed, was to be able to do some more in-house maintenance, which is not really a capability that the PD has at the moment. However, the city is fortunate to have a wonderful DPW maintenance services and has increasing capacity to maintain the city's fleet. So we had a meeting together to discuss what could that look like. Could DPW provide some of those maintenance services? It makes a lot of sense efficiency-wise as a city as a whole, and it helps us save some space in what we need here on campus. In concluding that meeting, we determined that that's a viable path forward. There's obviously things that have to be worked out on a logistical standpoint, operational standpoint, but it makes all the sense in the world. In doing that, we're able to reduce the size of some of the bays. There are bays that are larger than we previously showed because you need more room for maintenance. We don't need as much storage. You're not storing as many parts and things and all that. In doing that work, we're able to take about a little over 2,000 out of that fleet building, which helps. The other thing that is important to note in that is in that meeting we also sat down and went over what's going in each of these bays again. Let's re-review all those program elements. And in doing that, we confirmed that the number of bays and what's going in them is still valid and still proposed. Like, we still feel that that is a need and what we would suggest as a starting point. But we were able to reduce that space a chunk. The other thing we did too, which is it's a smaller item, but one of the things that we've spoken about in this building was the need for what's the term we're using for it? Apologies. The secured vehicle evidence storage. That's something that really we should have. From an accounting standpoint on the space needs assessment, the square footage for those spaces was actually being carried as in the main building. And it wasn't that we intended to put it there, but it's technically a part of the patrol department. So it had been carried under patrol as part of like, okay, this is their square footage needs, but it really belongs in this building. So now that we're really looking at square footage of different buildings, we've pulled that couple hundred square feet, like 560, out of the main building and moved it to the fleet building where it truly belongs. So that helps that number be more accurate, and obviously the fleet building is ultimately a lower cost of construction than what happens in the main building. So anything that we can put in there that should belong in there, we will put in there. So similarly, like the Bearcat right now, which is stored in the existing garage here in the main building, in theory, we would look to have that in the fleet building if it makes sense for the project, because it's space to put it, and a more appropriate space to put it, honestly.
We're trying to find if there's a way to move things to less cost per square foot. Let's move those things to the appropriate location so we're not paying premium for space that inside this building could be external.
I have a question around that in particular, because we have a space, I thought a lot about this, we have a space in this building that could potentially be eliminated that is ground floor space. The HVAC system space, if that is replaced, and it's accessible from, it would be easily accessible if you needed to put vehicle storage, especially if we're abandoning space on that level. So I would like to make sure that we can still are thinking about that, because it doesn't make sense to completely abandon that ground level space either, if it is usable. So,
Fair point and agreed. If we're short on space in the building and we need program space and we can use, that existing garage space for more, people program, then I think we do so. But if that doesn't make sense, then yeah, absolutely. Because we have the 2 garage bays here now, and then like you said, the mechanical space, which to be seen how that ultimately gets utilized.
Other questions? Are we still thinking that all of the fleet service would be here on this campus?
No. There will always be a need, and chime in if I say anything differently, but there will always be a need for a little bit of service here on campus, sort of checking if things, make sure the vehicles are ready to go every single day. But the thought would be is that the routine maintenance would be happening at the DPW facilities.
Yeah, I probably said it wrong. The fleet building that we have out back now, we're intending, aside from the service aspect, to keep all the other fleet functions and evidence functions here.
Yes, that those functions would maintain here on campus because that's sort of integral to your operations. You will get to the Bearcat right here, not over at DPW facilities. Evidence needs to be stored here, not off campus somewhere else.
All the functions of our current facility would remain.
And the difference really is there's the maintenance of the vehicle itself, the mechanics, the engine, the tires, and then there's the maintenance of the equipment inside the vehicle that is very specialized to the police department. It's not something that necessarily DPW maintenance would be
Yeah, like the
involved
crime,
with.
like the crime scene van.
Correct.
That type of thing.
Correct. So, as you know, there's an awful lot of equipment within a cruiser. So, that's the type of stuff that would remain.
I think that just to clarify is our garages are basically to store vehicles. We do very little actual fleet maintenance in our garage. All of that is done off-site.
Presumably that's why the square footage is lower and we're not installing lifts and all of that is now off the table.
Right.
Because you're not gonna have someone under there with a drill taking tires off. That sort of thing.
Somewhat, but I mean, for like your routine oil changes and all that stuff, that doesn't happen here.
Right.
If they gotta change a tire back there, that could happen here, but just your regular
Scheduled maintenance would
scheduled
head over to
maintenance.
Public Works instead of going outside.
Got
Or like now, we go to Portsmouth Ford, so.
this is a very creative solution.
Yeah.
Thank you for considering it.
It's a good synergy. Are we still, are we gonna have an issue balancing the expanded space needs for that garage with our parking? We probably headed
That's-
for some parking space calculations.
I think that is a to be seen. It's a valid concern and a likely one, but that's
I think we're too far away from that because depending on what we do for space and using space back here, we could have a huge parking issue that we need to address.
That's what I was gonna ask is where do you park when you come into work?
Behind the police station right now.
Right up back here,
Back here.
off of Mount Vernon.
And how many cars are there? How many are on a shift, a busy shift?
You wanna know how many spaces are out there that accommodate cruisers?
Yes.
I mean, cause we have basically about 35 vehicles in our fleet. And then all of our personal vehicles are parked back there.
is plus the 35.
Yes.
Oh, wow, you have a lot.
It's overflowing back there.
Does anybody ever try to sneak a little parking spot? Only kidding. Okay.
Yes, to answer your question. Well, it's not secured.
Peter?
Yes.
And we, and I think the discussion on the fleet and reduction, everything, as we go forward to making some of these recommendations, I think it would be good when those come to this committee that there be a sign off, either be it from the police department or city manager's office, that those are workable changes. So we don't spend time going over something that in the end it's not gonna work.
I think that's part of what, we heard the discussion that was happening before, we went back and we found a solution, and that's what we're presenting, that both the police department and the city manager's office agreed that that's the solution going forward. So I think that, to your point, we will, whenever there's a discussion around that, we'll try to follow up with that to make sure we can find some agreement on operationally what makes sense that will lead to a design change perhaps.
And you agree with that, too, Chief?
Yeah, I think the last meeting was a clarification of how we got to that number, and it wasn't clear. So we're clarifying that now, and that's it. We're not really having a discussion about whether we need this or don't need this at this point. At least that's not what I
I
understand.
think what I heard you ask is, will the city manager or anything we put before this committee that we're presenting will have already been seen and signed off by the police department and the city manager's office?
I guess my clarification would be, operationally, city manager and police department have some authority to do things. And that's what we're presenting, is a solution that said, we appreciated the discussion. I think we found an operational way to solve some of this. So along the way, our goal is to update you with operational things that might change the design or alter the design, but it comes from the discussions we have collaboratively around the table on the leadership team to say, okay, what makes sense for us to be able to report back? And so this is really a report back of that operational idea of a way to solve a problem a little differently, which then translates into a difference in the design, perhaps.
One of the things I'm trying to get away from and alludes to something that the mayor said, this has to be be able to be sold to the community. And first of all, to the city council. And if there isn't unanimity, then we're not gonna get that. So everybody might not get everything they want, but let's agree that it's the best that can be done if we're to move forward.
That's the goal.
That's what the best minds here are trying to do.
So are there any additional questions regarding fleet building or anything that discuss further at this point?
Do we know how many square feet the parking lot back there is?
You get that? We can get that, yep.
Because, we're 225% more square footage on the building than it is right now of net new, so. If they're already strained, then are we going up? Like, where are we going? Because there are houses on the other side. There's no land. There's no land for Mark to go take over.
All that is gonna be in discussion of, if the building needs to expand and take out pavement back there, then we're gonna have to look at alternative parking solutions.
Right, exactly. That's kind of what I'm asking. Okay, thank you.
Or consider parking, first floor parking. Something, so that we don't sacrifice space.
So the next item we wanted to discuss and sort of clarify a little bit was gross unit efficiency factors and sort of that apples to apples between the valuable work that Matrix has done, the work that ADG done, and making sure that we understand the language that they're both speaking. The reality is that the overarching message is that they're not all that far off from each other when we look at the end of the day. There are some. But firstly, it's the way that they approach doing the space needs assessment is slightly different. The way that EDG approaches is that they program all of the spaces, not just, offices and patrol, but also all your type of MEP spaces, mechanical rooms, electric rooms, all those are defined things. And then they add a grossing factor on it to account for exterior walls, structure, circulation, hallways, all of that sort of stuff. The way that Matrix approaches it is they program all of the, program spaces, offices, needs, stuff like that. They add a circulation factor for corridors. And then as part of, they then apply a grossing factor on top of all of that, which not only includes building structure, but also all the mechanical, electrical, plumbing type spaces. So they do it as a calculation versus AG doing it as defined spaces. What we ultimately did was we compared their gross and circulation numbers, broke out ADG's gross and circulation, including all the mechanical spaces, and said, okay, how do these numbers line up? Are we really off, or are we in the same relative ballpark? And generally speaking, we were in a similar space, similar space needs. Circulation and grossing, they weren't too far off each other. I think ADG we had about 13,000, and Matrix, when you add it all together, was a little bit more actually. One of the things that we wanted to note was by comparing them, you said before that there was a couple of spaces that Matrix had not included in their program, and they sort of said clearly like these are spaces we hadn't included, but we've confirmed with PD are spaces that are part of the police department's program. That's records and courts, auxiliary, 20-person conference room, the need for a community room. There's about 3,350 square foot of space that, as of now, we still feel is necessary for the program, or it already exists in the police department today and should remain. When you account for that program in Matrix's report, ultimately the two are about 5,000 square feet off of each other. I know in the beginning, when you look at just Matrix's report, the gap was fairly significant, 10,000 or so. What we feel right now is there's about a 5,000 difference, about 10%.
The important thing, I think, in this analysis that helped us understand was, regardless of the square footage, we think we're confident that the operational need is there. So we've identified all the operational pieces that have to be accounted for in design regardless of what space it may take up. The actual design space may differ. It may be less in some cases, it may be more, depending on what's available. So all of a sudden, if parts of the building become available and it's easier to not reconfigure a bunch of spaces, then an office that is programmed for something smaller in here might take up a bigger space just because it's easier than moving the walls. And so I think what we were really trying to get at is both approaches have their merits, but we think we now have an agreement operationally of all the things that need to be considered in a design, and then how that space ends up will be for JSA to sort of figure out along the way to see what can be put where throughout the building, if that makes sense. It's like, this has really helped us, the exercise of, let's not forget anything operationally. What you'll see later on too is we're also accounting for this potential things in the future so we don't miss it. So when we design for today, we're also looking for other needs coming down the road tomorrow that we just need to think about. Is there adjacency? Can it be repurposed? Is there space available to that?
I just need to ask something. So the important part of what we're trying to do is looking for new space for the police department to fit in. Okay, so let's say we get new space. Now, the costs will start building when you start picking up things like a toilet. A toilet might just be, $300 for a toilet. Now you ask for something special. Who at that point is going to be watching those pennies of a toilet? Because now you have, you've got 20 toilets. It starts to add up. and you don't realize it, and I'm saying this because there are a couple of nonprofits that have built things around the state. They're already in the hole. You know, I mean, people have already given a lot of money and they're in the hole. I mean, you want to make sure that the public understands that we are looking at every penny that we can. So who's going to be looking at those numbers?
So I could answer that. Maybe a combination of JSA and the city. What happens is during the design process, they will do interim steps of opinion and cost or estimating. And so they have professional estimators who know the cost of construction, they know the build out, they know the materials that are going to it. So as we go along, they know the costs that we have to stay with it. So they'll say, hey, we're tracking high. We need to figure out, do we go with a cheaper toilet? Do we, if we did, do we cut back on the number of toilets? Do we go, with a different type of rug? Do we go with,
Right.
How do we keep the costs within?
And
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. But you want to get there before he turns around and calls you and says, guess what? We're $1 million over on some ridiculous things. It's like, well, what the hell did you buy it for? I mean, I want to.
Well, our
No.
process will look like that, but it won't be when things are getting built. That's one of the reasons why we're working way ahead of the game. Because we'll say, okay, we need 20 toilets.
Right,
I haven't seen a $300 toilet installation in years.
right. I'm
But-
just throwing that out.
And I know, it's an example, but, we have to start from the standpoint of what we need to do to comply with code. So those are minimums, there'll be
Yeah.
minimums that we have to meet, no matter what. The question might be, is this a gold-plated solution? We wouldn't even start with that, to be honest with you. We recognize that they're taxpayers, there's council, there's people that need to use the toilets, because I'm gonna
Right.
stay with that metaphor, because
Yeah.
it's fun.
Yeah.
That they're gonna recognize it's great, there's a bathroom in this building,
Yeah.
in a council meeting. They're gonna meet minimum standards for code compliance. It's not gonna be like an array of extras around it.
The other thing that's very typical to happen on a project of this size, at some point, a construction manager is brought in for pre-construction services. It might not be a general contractor or a construction manager who's gonna construct the project, but they're hired specifically to do a much higher level of detail of estimating when the project is at that point and ready for that level of estimating. So there will be several estimates done at checkpoints along the way before this even goes out to bid.
And we have estimating in our professional estimating in our fee now. So we're expecting to be doing that before construction managers are hired. So we're gonna be at a pretty high level of precision. And so if the number, if it comes back, look, we're 2 million over based on this, we gotta fix that before we ask people to spend money. So that's the hard part of this process. It may be, as Kate mentioned a couple months ago, this could be a phased project. If we can only afford to spend 25 million now, let's get the best 25 million we can. Let's have the roadmap for what we need to do to finish the job and have an understanding what that cost could be. But so that we're in there understanding what we want, what we need, and what can we get. That's the balancing act.
The other tool that we've used with this team over at Community Campus, for example, is the last time we worked with JSA on a large project. We defined several add deducts menu items. So as the budget evolves and as bidding comes in, there are items that we identify beforehand that say, if we find that we have favorable bidding, we can buy additional items. These are things that we now can afford to do. Conversely, if the bidding environment we find is coming in high or costs are higher, there are things that we can deduct that don't have a massive impact. We identify several of those prior to even contracting with anyone.
And community campus building is the perfect example of an absolute screw up with when it was built. No, not now. No. I'm talking
We see
about-
that as a success.
No, but I mean, just the heat, and because of the way it was built, there was just, heat that went up and the windows, and I was there, so I saw it all, yeah.
Mr. Rice, not to jump ahead,
Uh-oh.
But during construction, would you be overseeing, or your department overseeing the management?
Yes. However, we would hire a resident engineer inspector.
Hire someone.
That would be, the person on the spot, and JSA, our intent is to have JSA involved during the construction process.
All right,
So it's a
and
team.
that would be included as part of the total construction package,
Total cost.
Total cost, it's not the construction cost, it's the total all in.
all in
Yeah,
cost.
it's soft costs that
All right.
go to the.
Will this person be capable, once construction starts, if a problem comes up, to immediately try to rectify it?
Yeah, the intent is working with the contractor. We have weekly meetings, if not daily, to go through any challenges. There's RFIs, requests for information coming from the contractor. That results in meetings with JSA, us. How do we resolve this with the contractor? How do you minimize? And sometimes that means additional costs. Sometimes it means cost savings. Sometimes it means we just can't afford to do this because there was some unknown material. There was something that we weren't aware of. So it's a very dynamic process. One thing we didn't talk about is the method of procurement. When there's traditional design bid build approaches.
Right.
There's construct manage approaches, which we've used recently, and a building like this probably warrants that type of thing. And there's design build, which is not how we would go in this building. There's too many unknowns to do a design build.
Yeah, and I will guarantee you, there will be unknowns in this building and there will be problems.
That's why we carry contingency. That's why we carry contingency.
Understand that,
Yeah.
yeah.
Way.
So that's why we're involved in construction, and that's why we have experts that are there who can address things quickly.
And one person's not going to be able to answer all the questions because there's structural issues, there's geotechnical stuff, there's electrical, there's all these different things. That one person, the resident inspector, will be the kind of facilitator, making sure those experts are involved.
If we can go back to the factor
this?
comparisons, I did have a few questions on this, because this has been part of the discussions in the past, is specifically like this community room concept. We talked a little bit about that being a shared space
Correct.
across the city, so we're counting it in police square footage.
So in our tabulations that we have at the end, we're counting that as a shared space. However, for the purposes of this comparison, we needed to include that shared facility space in this to be apples to apples because Matrix was as well. They were carrying it within PD, so we need to, otherwise it would sort of artificially skew the number, which wouldn't be as accurate.
And I think my other question is around, I'm less concerned about circulation factor and how that was determined, because ultimately this building is gonna make those determinations for us about what that percentage needs to be. But I was particularly concerned, the difference in programmatic totals was around 9,000 square feet, and that's pretty significant. Because when I look at records in courts, that doesn't get me to 9,000 square feet in a community room plus, not a community room, records in courts plus a conference room wouldn't get me to that 9,000 square feet differential. So that's what I'm trying to figure out is, why is there such a huge difference? I mean, you did some explanations of size of office space, but it seems pretty significant.
So of that sort of 9,000 difference that you're seeing between what Matrix originally proposed and where AG
Right.
stood,
Programmatic
There's-
space, yeah.
there's the 3,300 that is program that we feel Matrix. So that gets us from 9,000 to 5 plus or minus. We're in that range. So then that question of that 5,000 is what here.
Yeah, I'm just, it's still a lot of square footage. It's pretty significant. So, differential, before you take into effect circulation space.
So one thing that we could spend a lot of time focusing on those numbers. They're theoretical from both sides. And I recognize the concern, not diminishing it, but what we felt was the most important was to recognize that the personnel that we were housing were consistent between those two things, and that's where we found, that was mostly where that 3,300 came from, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
we have
from our
referencing points,
standpoint,
we still have
that was the most important linkage. The other stuff, you start getting into weeds and you could drive yourself crazy going through that. We're getting close to a point where we start laying out spaces on plans, and that's gonna start driving what the real numbers may be. And that will be putting us in a position of having to make decisions based on hardline layout as opposed to this is math.
I'm only concerned because I think we start conservatively and then, because it's going to grow. And the other concern I have is that it took a year of me pushing to get a matrix study because I didn't trust ADG's numbers. And I'm not the only person on the council.
Mhm.
So making an assumption that this 5,000 square feet doesn't matter is not accurate. It's very much a concern because square footage is dollars. So I think that that's really critical to remember.
I think, Councilor, that I don't think North meant to say 5,000 feet doesn't matter. I think it's more in terms of when we're comparing the matrix report to the ADG number, we're living with an existing building. So the 5,000 is a little bit in the noise, as long as we agree on what the programming needs are. That's ultimately what we need to do. And then the space will actually fall out from that. So it was more of a desire to like, okay, we've attempted to narrow down the differences. We understand there's the delta there. It's not insignificant, but it's part of, we will refine that as we start to place pieces on that puzzle. Because we really, until we start putting out things and getting a feel for where we're at, we won't be able to say, okay, we've shaved off 2,000 square feet here, we saved a little bit there. So it's the desire is to try to like say, okay, put a peg in it here. We understand there's a delta between the two, but we need to start moving forward so we can at least get a better feel for, what's the reality of space, the square footage of the needs.
And when we move forward, we're striving to be as efficient we can with space in with every opportunity that we can.
And you mentioned the community space. The ability to maximize the opportunity of shared resources within the building. That's a win for both sides of the equation. So, this is a great opportunity.
Yeah, my concern is that we're gonna increase the size of office space or increase the size, that we're gonna take advantage of opportunities of shared space like community room, but then we're gonna say, but this office needs to be, 20 square feet larger and this one needs to be, and so we're increasing sizes of things unnecessarily. And so that's what I'm trying to be very mindful of, because Matrix came in with smaller room sizes. Yeah.
I think, just to kind of reiterate, if we net it out and it's like 5,500, your numbers were right. So it's like 22% of what the programming space that Matrix came back with. So I'm not, again, a construction professional, but I think 22% is a big number. And I guess what I don't understand is, do we think the 33,270 is the programming space need? Do we think the 24,446 plus the 3350 is the programming space need? What is the number right now that, as we move forward from this kind of scoping phase to a design phase, which is what I think we were just alluding to, right? What's that number? And it's not apparent to me in these materials what that number is. Maybe I'm missing something. I'm not that bright, so maybe I am. But
I think you're probably pretty bright. I'm trying to.
And I'm not trying to put you in a corner and say, give me a number.
And it's again, I think from my standpoint, if I need 12 patrol officers, space for 12 patrol officers,
Mm-hmm.
it looks like this in one guy's plan, and it looks like this in another
Totally.
guy's plan, right? And
But what's it going to look like in this plan?
exactly, and I couldn't tell you. It's probably going to be somewhere between the two, because the matrix are coming at it from a theoretical they were looking at it from an operational standpoint, as I understand it, and there's a, average office space is gonna be 110 square feet, or for
Whatever it
patrol,
is.
it's 60. So they add all those things up and it comes up to a number. We could take this building and clear it out to the columns and be more efficient spatially, but we could be losing efficiency cost-wise by not
Yeah, totally.
making those
Yeah.
judgments. So that's kind of the why.
It's the difference between a heavy reno and a light reno, totally.
Yeah.
Understood.
So and we want
And the
to
cost per square foot for the heavy is way
Exactly.
bigger than the
we want
cost
to
for
lean
light.
towards lean towards more cost efficient,
Totally,
and so that'll make some spaces less efficient,
right,
right?
right.
So
And the question then becomes, right, because obviously the most expensive thing is new construction, and that's over $1,000 a foot, right? Like wherever it is now. It was $1,000 a foot whenever we started, so who knows what it is now? So I think,
there's a ballroom being built in Washington that's over 3,000 square feet, $3 a square foot. I don't think we're at that level.
do we have any other third rails we want to touch today, guys?
I'm
Yeah, I know, I understand. I'm responding in kind.
yes, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, life's too short. Yeah, and so like I said, I'm not trying to paint you in a corner. I'm just trying to understand, like, again, and maybe it is. So adding the 24,446 and the 3350 gets you to somewhere between the two. Maybe it's 28, right? I don't know, but I think as we kind of go forward, having some sort of understanding of, all right, like, we've spent a ton of money on two studies and they take two very different approaches, and obviously it's going to be somewhere in the middle. Like a reasonable person is going to say, all right, here's the upper bound, here's the lower bound, we're going to fall somewhere in between. Great. Where in between? And let's put some sort of flag in the sand somewhere. It's not to say we have to die there, but let's put something down and yeah, that's a great idea.
Target. Sure, makes sense.
And then we're measuring against something, and maybe it's wrong, it's going to be wrong.
There will certainly be differences because
Right.
of the conditions.
One of my things that I say to everybody that I've ever hired in my life is, and I come from a finance background, all models are wrong, some are useful. This will be wrong, hopefully it's useful directionally. And if it's useful directionally, then they get a better PD and you guys get a better place to come to work every day, and we all live happily ever after, hopefully.
Looking at your last page, the SNA and the ADG comparisons.
This page?
No,
That's the last page.
Talking
Oh, I
about,
thought you said the last
The
page.
matrix and the,
Yep. AJ, yep, that's right.
so is it safe to assume you're standing behind the ADG?
that's what we were just talking about.
Yeah, I know.
I think it's safe to assume that if we have a program understanding, and these are both written around the same concepts,
Yeah,
the factors are different, the square footages are different, there's a lot of different reasons for that. That if we know we're designing to, and call it the stake in the ground, am I gonna live and die on what has been done theoretically by Matrix or ADG? It's a target. We're going to work to it. We're going to try to do better than that. But I don't know that that's, we're in a position to say, this is it. I'll guarantee you it's going to be this.
let me ask you differently. Are you comfortable that you could come up with something based on these numbers?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Now,
So in other words, that's the upper limit, roughly.
that's the upper limit.
Okay, great.
The realities are in this building, because this is just the police station. Right? We've got a whole nother exercise that we're in the middle of right now.
And how many square feet is that, Peter? Right.
But we're gonna come up with what that,
83.
Yeah.
the size of the balloon, based on what we're learning from staff.
I guess what I'm
Need to be
looking
added
for
together.
is what you're starting with as you're doing the design. If you find that you're over that, you gotta come back and start looking at how we're gonna get.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other point I was gonna make is we can come up with the ideal circumstances where everything fits in this building. And let's say it's the matrix for the police department, and we've realized some efficiencies by shared spaces and so forth. We may still have a budget problem.
Yeah.
Right? And we're gonna have to say, okay, this is where the stake in the ground stops with what can be executed in the city.
On this
That's
number.
still a process down the road.
Right.
Because at some point, you're gonna say, somebody's gonna tell us, no, 35 million's the number, or 25 million's the number, or whatever. I know it's not 72.
Well,
I think we were
Well,
working with
the
42.5.
42, okay, 42.5.
yeah,
not-
that's the number,
Yeah.
that's the number that is out in the public right now, is 42.5.
Right, and that's
Is that
probably
for the whole
project,
That's total cost though.
that's project
Total
cost.
cost.
Right, that's total cost. That's
To
not
take away that-
construction, that's all in.
All in.
Right.
Including spent today.
Including
We do,
spent
I mean,
today.
this is,
Yeah.
we do this stuff all the time, right? Is that, in the end, the owner's gonna say, I've got this much money, this is what I want, I got this much money. If those marry, that's awesome, we have a successful project. If they don't, we make decisions about what we can buy, what we can make room for in the future, provide structural capacity for change down the road. It's still a win-win, you're moving the ball forward, but we have to respond to what the public is willing to support. And, that's our job too. We all have the same job.
The other thing to remember, right here and now, we would never come up with a hard, exact number of square footage what the project's going to be. It would never happen. So we do have to define a target. It's critically important to move forward that we define a target.
Yeah.
We try to hit it. We try to improve on it. We're as efficient as we can be to reach it.
Well, Joe, you also have to build in a contingency.
Absolutely, absolutely. And every step along the way, we're being as efficient as we possibly can.
Right.
So that's why I was suggesting that the lower numbers are better, because there is more chance, if you aim for the lower numbers, you're gonna get more in the end,
Yeah, okay.
overall.
I mean,
Because you're more likely to get all the facility you want if it's
Yep.
less square footage and it costs less
Well,
money.
that being said, so if we make the lower number our target, which we do as a group, we decide that lower number is our target. Along the way, if the efficiencies or inefficiencies of the building say,
Right.
this room has to be bigger because it already exists, and we don't want to put a penny into it, we all agree that the number will grow. We're
Exactly.
not held exactly to that lowest number.
we've done a lot of government work, and
Perfect.
That's exactly,
working with the Navy is a classic example of non-common sense. And what we want to be guided by is, we have objectives, we have common sense. So when we were building Navy housing, and thousands of units in the Carolinas, and the Navy said that a bedroom needs to be 130 square feet. We realized if we used 4x8 sheets of plywood and laid out the spaces in these buildings so you didn't cut, which saved a lot of labor. The bedrooms were 10 square feet bigger. The Navy's response was, nope, can't do it. Don't save money. That's not the people we're working with here. We need to be sensible.
GSA.
Right. No, that's Navy. They're even worse than GSA.
It's just horrible.
So, I mean, we all want the same thing. We want the best thing for the city, the best thing for the police department, for the citizens. I still remember registering my car, paying for a dog license. It's not a satisfying experience. We can do a lot better than that.
So I guess, is there, to help us keep moving, is there consensus that we aim for the programming that's identified to make sure that those that are considered? The preference is to aim for the lower number identified as guidance to JSA. Make sure you fit the programming in, but aim for the lower number when it comes to design as feasible, unless there's opportunities that say it doesn't make economic sense to have a smaller room if a bigger room was less of cost. Is that a good consensus
Well, I think you need
point?
to be, there's still a balance. So if you can create two really smaller offices there that still function
Sure.
within the confines of existing walls, it makes sense.
So, I'm looking for trying to move some consensus of program for the operations that we know we need, aim for the lower number.
Yes. I
Is
mean,
that-
what we're hearing is Matrix came in at 4,800 feet lower. And if we can redirect towards that, that's a win. If it's not practical, then we have to confront that.
Okay. That seems like a very reasonable goal to strive for.
I have a
So
question.
I'm sorry, just to put a nail in it, we will take that as direction to JSA from the committee. Is that consensus with the committee? Is that direction?
I wanna know what the chief thinks.
I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I think we're so far from that number that it, like, right now is, they haven't got enough information to be able to say what the square footage is because of all the things that we're talking about. You know, if we were doing a standalone building, a building from scratch, it'd be a different story, but we're in here. There's all kinds of things that we're gonna run into that aren't gonna be expected, so. I mean, we're talking about arbitrary numbers, and I think 5,000 square feet that, you know, we've been talking about is a reasonable number that, like, we all identify, we understand, but it's not gonna make or break this project.
I mean, a new build costs us $5.5 million, it could make or
Which
break
is
the
which is
project.
why I think it's just, again,
So-
as a consensus or direction, program for
It's an
the
unknown
operational
number.
needs as identified.
Right, I get that, I'm just saying,
And aim
from
for
an
the
actual
lower number
implementation
as
standpoint,
feasible.
it's
It just feels like a very
Yeah.
easy direction.
Right.
And again,
12.5% of
however
all
it
in
plays out,
cost.
it'll play out, but that feels like a really good way to say, that's a good direction. Is there a consensus for that?
that the upper limit of the program number is the ADG report? Is that what we're
Call it
saying?
an upper limit, I
I
think that what
think
we're
it was
hearing is,
the aiming for,
let's set a target so we can, we're driving towards a more efficient solution.
Right, so the
And
target
again,
would be the
if we're looking at the
24.4
difference
plus the
between
33.5?
45 and
Yeah, great,
50.
that's a target.
Yeah.
I love that.
We're still gonna need to fit it in existing buildings.
Right, exactly, and so we don't know, and I think, you know,
But we need to move
reasonable minds
forward so that we-
understand that.
We're just trying to make sure that we can keep moving forward, and I think this is a good inflection point of, okay, program operationally, aim for the lower number unless it's not feasible with report back. And then it just moves on and we can continue to let them work on the other side of the operation at City Hall, they can start thinking about designs, at least they have some direction of where you'd like them to head.
Everybody okay with it? Peter, Renee?
Okay, great discussion.
I had a question about cost per square foot. You know, in the working group that looked at the initial plans, we came up with $1,000 a square foot. We benchmarked that against all the other police facilities, and it's, you know, it's within a range of 900 to 1,050. So, and a lot of that was driven by the need to be, quote, hardened. So if we can find parts of this space need, like a community room that can be shared, tell me that that doesn't have to be hardened to be 1,000 square feet, right?
Maybe $1,000 per square feet.
Meaning it's not part of the interior secure portion of the police department. It would be in, adjacent to the lobby or something, and it doesn't need to have the same security protocol. If that's what hardening is, right?
Well, you're basically saying between a category 3 and category 4 standard, correct? You know, and I think the conversation that would have to be had there is, would that, could that space function as an emergency management center? And if the answer is yes to that, then it would have to be. If the answer is no, then it wouldn't have to be.
I mean,
John, Counselor, I would think as part of the exercise, similar to the size of something, the process will be iterative and we'll look at, you know, they know this, we have a certain budget. In order to get to that budget, you manage, you know, you reduce the square footage of the most expensive renovation or work versus the least expensive renovation. So it's gonna be a balance. And depending on what the economy is, the cost of construction, you know, may come down. I mean, if we continue to see sliding, starts of projects and stuff, contractors are gonna start saying, hey, I need to keep my guys busy, so I'm gonna bid more aggressively. So it really is a,
Dynamic process.
yeah, I mean, we built the water treatment plant in Madbury in 2008. We bid it, we bid it in that timeframe. It was done in 2011. We got that recession bonus. The initial costs were 34 million. We came in at 19. So it was, it was a huge. I mean, it was a huge savings. I mean, it was such that.
All right, Peter, do it again.
Hey, you're right. I rode the curve. It's just that was a really unique situation. People were really hungry.
Well, we've got two drivers. We've got square footage driven by program. And we've got cost per square foot
Right.
driven by the two different security level needs.
And also the level of renovations.
Right.
So it's not just the security, it's not just the hardening aspect, it's also whether you're doing deep renovation versus or new construction.
Sure. So I'm just surfacing this idea of if there are parts that don't have to be hardened, can we take advantage of it?
Sure.
Absolutely.
And that's absolutely, that's why we hired these guys.
Yeah, there's a lot of, and even as far as the emergency management piece, there's a lot of grant money to cover that would offset the costs, even if you have to harden it,
Did you say grant money?
federal grant money for emergency management centers.
Oh, we got
But
rid
it
of
has to meet the specs of an emergency management center, which costs more money. But it's offset by, you get a $5 million grant that's gonna pay for it, then maybe it's worthwhile.
The police department's done a great job getting grant funding, so.
That would be part
And
of
the
that sort
public
of
would love
cost
that.
benefit analysis of, okay, if it has to be hardened
Get
space,
something
but
that
there's
would-
money available,
I
then
would
that
wait
might
for
be
it.
worthwhile. And that's part of that, but I appreciate the raising it so that way they can be thinking about what should be hardened, what should.
Yeah, and I think it all flows from Peter Weeks's point that the 42 million figure is the figure that's out there in the public mind right now. So, the further we.
The 38 million is a better place to look because the 42 includes soft costs. So if you look at the 38, that is, kind of the message that we should work around.
Future policing and AI and real-time information centers, did we want to take time? Sure.
And again, I think we appreciate all the questions around that, and so we look for providing some resources around that to talk about sort of where's the future of policing and AI. I think the article that we put in there is helpful, probably one of the most, or the easiest ones that people are sort of using AI for has to do with report drafting, and there's a little video, if you go on their website, you can watch that as well. And it's estimated that, 3 hours per shift might be spent writing reports versus Axon with the body cameras is using technology to give a draft based on the audio from that. The real benefit to that over the long haul is as the community grows, you may be able to do more with the same number of officers over time. It really helps them become more efficient and get more activity out on the street when they're out there and not just spending 3 hours on every shift writing reports. We know that's an area that we're gonna keep an eye on. We just renewed, we gotta have that whole contract with Axon. This is something we may start experimenting with. And I think it really will show what are the efficiencies, just like we're looking across, City Hall, where are the ways that we could use technologies and other initiatives. This is really a good one. So that article is there to really help you see where things are heading, and we're just thinking about that programmatically. So from an operations perspective, from the chief, we're just considering in there, okay, what are some of the things we might want to consider? The other piece that was in here was just that real-time information center, which is really about being able to, in an incident, see live into what's happening. It's the registering of everybody's Nest Cam. It's the having a drone that can go out and having a space adjacent to where dispatch is, where you could see what's happening live is important. So part of what JSA's plan is to consider that whenever they talk about the space, so there is space in that in the future, because that has really been helpful. There's an article we put in there as well, and ADG put out sort of what that looks like and why folks are using it. It really gets sort of real time, eyes in the sky essentially to really know what's happening if an incident occurs. And Chief, anything else you want to add on that? But it really seems to be the
I can
way
pretty
of
much
making
cover
sure
it.
we
That's-
plan for that.
That's gonna be the future. It's already
It's here.
in
Wait,
place.
Peter, I'm sorry.
It's already in place and active in many police departments now. So we don't have the capability of doing it in our current facility here.
But you would be in this.
That's the hope.
We're making sure that we factor it in so that we
Right.
don't design and not consider this. So part of the
Exactly.
design will say, how do we make sure that we have space and adjacencies available so that you can grow into that when this becomes more real for the city.
In the other designs that have been done, Chief, was this included?
In other police stations,
No.
In the
Our studies
no,
that,
we didn't have that in our other ones. We didn't
This is
have
sort
that.
of an
That's it,
emerging.
yeah, this
emerging
is-
technology.
This has
We
just
wanna
come
make
on
sure
the
we-
last couple of years.
We plan for both the needs now, but think about where the future is heading, so we don't look back 5 years and say, why didn't we consider this when we?
And just to be clear, we're not saying that we're including this in the program right now. What we're saying is we're gonna make sure that we put a storage room next to this or a space that we can more easily move than say, hey, we're gonna box this in with mechanical rooms that we can never then easily move. We need to make sure we have some flexibility, so we're considering that flexibility.
Infrastructure in the space adjacent to
Precisely.
the dispatch, so that if they choose in 10 years to implement this, it's not a nightmare.
Exactly.
Planning for the future, so we don't regret it and say, oh, why didn't we plan for the future of where things were heading?
The public needs to know about this. They need to be educated, so it's not gonna be as difficult for you when you're up there, you have people
Agreed.
screaming
Yes.
about this. And that's very important that the public
Starts now.
understands what this is and why it is so needed. And I don't know how you let them transfer what we're trying to say to them, where they just go, oh, okay. Cause this is gonna be fun for you.
I mean, by the time this place is built, we would need it. It's not gonna be like, it's not that
Right.
much. When I say future, I'm just saying it needs to
Saying
be designed now.
2028, 2027.
Uh,
Right. So, Chief, this is an ignorant question, and forgive me. 3 shifts a day? 8.
No, we have all kinds of different random,
But so, how long is a shift on average?
generally 10-hour shifts.
10?
Yeah.
So 30% of a shift is report writing. Based on that 3-hour math, give or take.
I mean, if you're gonna use that number.
Yeah,
it can
I
be,
guess what I'm getting at is, so if they can cut that time in half because their body cam transcribes
Yeah.
every interaction they have,
That just means they
that
spend more
means
time
that,
on the
right,
street.
and it's,
or-
that's the value additive work that you guys do.
Right.
Okay. It's the proactive piece that we talk about. Great. Thank you.
For a space like this, can we consider shared space as well? For like the conference room space, can the conference room space double as this type of space?
I would say we should look at that. You would need to make sure that space can be easily secured and segregated in a manner, that allows the chief, a secure situation. We don't have a stray person just walking into a.
Oh, but you mean like the conference space within the PD?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I think that's a great, I think anything that we can sort of dual purpose would be a great
Yeah.
idea, yes.
Is there a reason why the emergency response space and a conference room and this space isn't the same room? This is more of a question for you two,
Say that
operationally.
again?
Is there a reason why, like an emergency response command center, like one that we might apply for a grant for,
Yeah.
this space for real-time AI data information, where if there's a massive incident in town, you and Mike are in there quarterbacking the situation, that space, the emergency response space, and a conference room. Is there a reason why those 3 things are not the same room? And it's got multiple purposes, and if it's in the PD, it's already hardened, it's secure, it's this, that, and the other thing.
Yeah, like I've been in,
You've got a
taken
wall
some
full
tours
of monitors and
yeah,
whatever, and
it's
you guys
all-
turn them on.
Yes, answer your question. It's really not one room, but it could be a room, like a conference room that runs off of this room. They're quickly accessible, but because it's, this real-time information center runs just like a dispatch center. So you don't wanna
Right.
have all that interaction,
Right.
other things going on. And then
It's almost like you could have like a sliding wall, like
Yeah,
people do in
yeah,
a lot of
you could.
buildings now. And so you'd have one large conference room, and part of it could be that sort of dispatch center.
Costs a lot.
I'm just playing with how do we consolidate as
Those are-
many
those
spaces
are
into one
pricey.
as possible.
But they have, I mean, there's a use for them.
Right.
When you have a need for different configurations.
I think in general, anything that can have more than one purpose is helpful when you're doing this. So I think that, again, for JSA to come back and think about these things, but again, anything that can be dual purpose or multi-purpose is helpful, so you're not duplicating space. But we just wanted to make sure, and we appreciated all the conversation around it, but we wanted to provide a little more details to some of the questions that were asked to say, here's where things are heading. We're factoring it in just so we don't underestimate or not factor this and then go back and have to do something over. So we just want to make sure that, we've been chatting with the chief, where things headed. Let's make sure we're considering these things to make sure we program it operationally as well.
I think that.
As you're looking at things,
Would you like Mark to speak?
I was just gonna say, just on what you're saying, that's the importance of adjacencies when we
Right.
design things, and why
100%.
things need to be where they need to be.
Right. And the reason I asked it the way I did is, like I said, is there a reason why we wouldn't do that? Because operationally, I'm not a policing professional and I don't know what your needs are. But to me, it led to reason, we could ostensibly combine those spaces. If you've got an emergency response center and you have a real-time dispatch center, that to me, these feel like operationally things that might be interconnected. Again, I'm not that bright, but
as we're looking at combined spaces, let's take a look at the current council chambers and see what else that can be used during the times when the council's not using. I mean, it goes unused a lot of the time, and it's a big area.
And I think that that's a good segue into municipal square footage update, because there are questions about the council space being potentially even too big, too much space, maybe that can be better utilized, again.
Perfect segue. Okay, so, and again, JSA has met, and why don't you talk through some of the findings that you have so far, and again, they're still finalizing a couple of the meetings we still have left, but a lot of work has been done today.
So at this point, we've met with almost all the municipal departments. There's a few meetings we still want to have, at least for the first pass. That's with the registrar, who's been obviously busy right now. We don't want to disrupt that important work. Working with Joe and team to make sure we understand the facility side, not just MEP, but their storage needs, their maintenance needs, that stuff. And lastly, making sure that we understand the adjacencies and the shared needs between the legal department and the prosecutor's office within the PD. Even though they are in separate spaces, they are still sort of one. And so there's a conversation that needs to be had with those two together in the same room to make sure that we make sure we've connected all the dots between the two of them. So those are sort of the three main meetings we still want to have. That said, we've had some very fruitful meetings with everyone else, which has been great. So in the memo, we provided a couple of high points and key takeaways at this point that are helping drive our programming. The first is the point of service, and how do we define who really needs to be in that space, who needs to be near it, and who can be totally remote from it. We know that this first floor space, or I guess it's second floor technically, is going to be at a premium. So making sure we're cognizant of that. So some of it's obvious: water, sewer, billing, tax, assessor, clerk, registrar. Those are all folks that have to be right here. Folks that need to be close, slightly more removed, but close: health, welfare, inspections department. There's a lot of foot traffic, but it's not the type of interactions that have to be right in a public space. And then there's other folks who are not as, window-based service. It's more scheduled meetings, folks like planning, the city manager, legal, community development, where it's scheduled community public interactions. It's not the sort of walk-in day-to-day. We spent some time with everyone talking through key adjacencies, who needs to be next to who, what's most important. So we sort of laid out that list, and that'll just make sure that we have everyone by where they need to be, who's joined at the hip and who's not. Really, I think the most important thing is the the growth, additional space needs and opportunities, that section of the conversation.
Oh, no, good.
I say generally speaking, everyone we spoke with, no one was indicating anticipated growth. There's, I think, a possibility that, like, well, if we did this, there could be a need for a staff member, or if we maybe did this, those aren't programs that are defined right now or necessarily planned. So it's not something that we're necessarily acting on yet, but those are conversations that'll have to be had in the city. But the good news is it's not like we're expecting to need tons of additional space. All of that was sort of maintaining consistent. The most consistent space request by all the departments was conference room space, which isn't probably a surprise to anyone, but that data point held true throughout. You know, not everyone needs a big office, but they really need conference room space. So our ability to provide that in the future program is going to be really important. Offsetting that by reducing office sizes and things will be helpful. And if there's enough conference room space, it's not that it's dedicated to one department necessarily, but once you have enough of it, it makes scheduling easy, which right now is a difficulty. And you don't want to have a meeting of 6 people in the council chambers. That's a little size. One of the interesting takeaways that we want to make sure we're accommodating in the point of service is the need for a space slightly removed that's a little more private and a little more dignified. There's lots of interactions that happen every day that are just transactional, but there are equally a lot of them that are not, that you're going over sensitive information or you're dealing with something personally where you're upset, you're emotional. So being able to have some more privacy and have some more dignity in handling those conversations is something we want to be sensitive to moving forward. Right now, that doesn't really exist. You're either doing it at the counter with everyone around you, or you're going into someone's personal office, which isn't always the best option either. So our ability to incorporate some of those spaces in the point of service is going to be important. It's not something that exists today, but it's something that we feel we need to be sensitive to moving forward.
A neutral space, if you will. It's not someone's office. It's not an open
Right.
public space. It's a neutral.
Basically like a small conference room, but where you can sit down and go over, you know, your personal finances when you're doing your assessments or something without someone next to you hearing all that kind of information, or you can share. And we saw that kind of with not every department, but a lot of them. Water, sewer billing, assessors, obviously health and welfare. There's a lot of sensitive conversations and personal conversations that happen that could be better accommodated.
I think people don't realize, I mean, I was even at the clerk's office a few weeks ago and a woman was there and she had to close out all of her father's records because he had just passed away. And she was crying and she was upset and she was trying to get, you know, his records from, and it would have been helpful to have a space for her to sit and not stand at the counter.
And right now, the option is counter or in someone's office. And so we're really trying to just account for that need in across a lot of departments.
Would that, presumably that's a shared space across departments?
I think that's definitely a
Is that
potential.
directionally where we're headed?
We would certainly try to make.
I think we're trying to make the most use of shared spaces depending on what the need are. The other is we've seen that some things are seasonal, right? So even when you talk about even in the point of service, you know, there are times that certain departments are really busy that would have multiple windows open, and then other times of the year they might not have as many. And so we're thinking about how do we make those flexible as well? So all of a sudden it's like in a busy tax season, you open up more windows, but in a slower season, those become other uses instead. And so we're really looking at that, how do we create flexibility in design so that even during the calendar when things fluctuate, we can move into that space when needed and move back out accordingly. So the space behind might be the same way.
Right, and the reason I asked the question is, the next, obviously, and you kind of hit on it, question is, presumably if it's a shared space, and whether it's one room or 5 rooms, I don't know, how many rooms do you guys think you need? How do you operationalize that so that all of the departments that need that space can use it effectively? Because we can't necessarily predict when, to Kate's point, somebody's father's passed away, and they're sobbing in the hallway in front of the clerk's office. And obviously that's not good for the clerk. It's not good for that client, resident. It's not good for other residents. Like, nobody wins in that situation. So and I don't have the answer. I'm just putting it out there.
So we're
What does that
wrestling
look
with
like
the,
operational?
what would be dedicated, what would be sort of shared, and what would be scheduled, and we haven't determined it yet, but it's a great,
Right, but
it's a
that's
great-
exactly where I was going.
Yeah, exactly.
You're hitting,
And we're thinking about those things to say, okay, and
You're
if
smarter
these,
than I
these,
am, you
these
got
three
it.
departments might have that need, then let's locate some space behind that window and only they share it, because that's where there's a little more need for some privacy than, my registering a car, whatever that might turn out to be. And so we're thinking that through, so I appreciate the questions.
You're
and I
way
think
ahead of
That's
me.
what we're looking at to say, again, what are the needs, and we're still digesting some of that.
And that's, we heard sort of that separate need from multiple departments and asking like, well, how often is this? How frequent is it? And then we need to come back to them and say, well, here's what we're hearing from everyone. Here's what we think could work. What are your thoughts? And we're going to get different answers, and that's going to help us arrive to,
And there's gonna be
is it 3,
triage
is
during
it 4?
situations, there's gonna need to be prioritization, that comes down to the managers, people that are on the thing to be paying attention and to helping. That's an operational type of thing, so.
Okay, is there anything additional sort of point of service?
No, I think that's good.
The last sort of interesting topic, this rises storage and
We learned a lot in those discussions.
And last week, 2 weeks ago,
Yeah, and 2 weeks ago.
We learned a lot 2 weeks ago, yes.
and I was away. It was great.
So just to, so the key things that we've been asking everyone is, what is your storage right now? What do you really need at your space, accessible all day, every day? What could be remote from your space, but you still need easily accessible on campus? What can be offsite? What is in access so infrequently, and what can be digitized and either offsite or, gone completely? So there's a lot of different sort of records retention standards and working to help make sure everyone understands what applies to each department. It's not universal for all the city. My understanding is it's a very long list of 100 different items, and each is a little bit different. But there's a lot of extensive paper records right now that we found can be offsite or can be digitized and really not needed. The sort of common example is inspections. They have to keep records for as long as the building stands. And who's going to go through and find, this building got knocked down, and then get rid of it because people want to have it anyway. So they have 30-something filing cabinets, 10 closets full to the brim. It's pretty funny. It's daunting.
It's daunting, and I think that what we also learned was, for a functional perspective, scanning it in and having access to it electronically, even if you have to store those records off-site somewhere permanently, great. And there'll be a cost benefit to that, because sometimes scanning and storing somewhere else is a whole lot cheaper than renovating space inside a building. And what we've learned is we really should be storing things in the basement of this building because everything flows downhill. And it just doesn't make sense in the long term. So I think that we're going to have some of those, but it was very enlightening to see what are all the needs, and what we're going to come up with is what's the schedule, make sure that we really get a feel for what are your working files, what could be remote if needed, and then really come up with a better plan for moving some of that and reclaiming some of that space that's currently just a lot of paper and weight sitting in the building.
when we say moving, I hope we mean digitizing, right? Not renting storage space offsite and just putting boxes.
So digitizing when we can. There are some requirements for keeping paper forever, and if we're
Right.
keeping paper forever,
Right, right, offsite.
yeah, offsite may be a more economical option than getting something that doesn't have leaks and all the other things associated with the building. So yeah, so I think we're looking at that. The more we can digitize, the better.
Do we know what proportionality of the records that we have here fall into that perpetual retention category?
We almost know. That's what we're learning.
Okay,
We're getting
A
closer
lot
to
of it's
that.
just a cycle. So it's like, okay, you've got to keep these for 7 years, but I really only need 2 years working files. Okay, great. So right now we're storing 7 here.
Right, so 5 goes away.
So
Five goes away.
We're asking departments to be very specific and learn whatever their true rules are, legal rules are for storage, to brush up on those.
Right.
And come back, because we'll see them again,
Right.
and they might learn, you know what, we can get rid of
Right.
this percentage.
And then there's a policy, right? Then there's an SOP, and every year, every 6 months, or whatever it is, we get on a cadence where we don't stockpile
That which
shit
can be
everywhere, for
destroyed
lack of a
gets
better
done,
word.
and that which can be retained gets retained. That which can be electronic going forward, so now you're not having a new record that's paper. Those are all the discussions that we're having now. Because again, it's just more efficient. You know, look at most of what happens now in planning and building, it's all submitted electronically.
I mean,
So
you know,
a
you
lot
think
of it's
about
just keeping this archive, but is this the best use of premium real estate to
Right.
just store a bunch of plans? Probably not.
and you think about like even for Mark's team, right? Like you got a repeat customer at the PD. Is it easier for them to digitally search for that or to rustle through a file cabinet? And so how do we increase the proportionality, and whether it's the clerk's office or take a department draw it out of the hat, right? How can we create efficiencies, not just in the space, but in our team's work days, so that they're not dealing with mountains of paper? Because that's just not a good way to look for things to begin with.
We've already started a lot of this digitization, department by department. The police department is doing that now, the legal department has been doing it, but there is a cost. It's pretty significant, and at what point,
I think it's close to $20,000 for us to digitize all of our plans.
okay,
However, it's amazingly useful.
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah, now it's just, go look for stuff,
that's a lot less expensive than the square footage of the building.
We were surprised a little bit because when we heard some of the cost of what will it cost to scan, and then we thought, that's cheaper than square footage in the
Yeah,
building.
a
And I
lot
think that was, it seems like a lot until you compare it to this. And then all of a sudden it's like, maybe that. It's far
And it's more searchable, that's the beauty.
So I think that's part of this equation is how do we successfully get things digitized in a functional way that then frees up space that doesn't cost as much. So that's
What's
part
the
of it.
job satisfaction of someone that spends 4 hours looking for a piece of paper? I'm just curious.
Depends on the person.
Fairly
I know-
low.
I know some people that really love going through paper stuff.
I would say no.
I bet you they're not like patrolmen that like writing reports.
No.
We're in an age where we can really take advantage of.
Right. If we can get it, 20%, 30%, 40%, 50% better, it doesn't need to go away because it's not going to go away. But let's just make it better.
Can we, let's finish out, we're getting close to
finish this.
4:30. I know I had a question on square footage needs, I don't know if anybody else has. Cause there's this whole discussion around, private office space versus, cubicle space. And I just wanna know how it was determined that private office space maybe was better for some uses versus cubicle
You
space.
talking about the municipal side, you mean?
Yeah, on the municipal side,
When that question came up, I was surprised at how many department heads or staff members were open to cubicles
okay.
versus.
Well,
Sometimes it's a absolute necessity, right? But
And sometimes it's not, but the hardest part now, the reason there are so many offices, we have big open hallways that people can wander down. If all of a sudden you have a point of service and you have now a wing that can be freed up, you can reconfigure that space much differently because the public isn't walking through it. So now there's a room for a little sitting area. Now there's a room for something else. There's a room for just a workstation because I can work there and somebody just wander through as you're working on some legal thing or whatever else. So I think part of what we're looking at is what's the need in the future that you could reclaim some space and gain some square footage by just taking out the big long hallways that right now people just wander through.
And a big part of that is how we're viewing security.
Yeah.
So, as part of a government facility that needs to be open and available and accessible. And there are parts of a government facility that needs some level of security. Certainly, police department needs a higher level of security than, legal and city manager's office. But we are going to be integrating a security system building-wide. So those spaces don't need that privacy that comes with that level of freedom.
To add one point, in the conversations we had, when there were requests for no, we think, these folks do need private offices, most of the time it was because of privacy considerations, hey, these people spend a lot of time on the phone talking about very sensitive things that people shouldn't overhear, even adjacent staff members. Like if you're not working on that sort of case investigation, that really shouldn't be overheard. Now that's a discussion that needs to happen, but a lot of those requests were driven by privacy, sort of sensitivity to things. But a lot of people were, I think, fairly receptive to it once the security aspect was addressed.
I'm asking this because Novacure has this really interesting model where they have cubicles in the middle, but then they have private offices, private spaces along the side that could be utilized if you needed to have a private conversation. And I asked this too because I worked in national security as a diplomat, and I was handling extremely classified information, and we all worked right next to each other in cubicles, even if we were handling different things that the others didn't know about. So, and
You had
managed.
security clearances and
Right,
things that you were,
exactly.
you know, you were monitored
Exactly,
annually
but-
by the.
Right, so, but that's, I mean, we were discussing sensitive things though, that like, and so my sense is in a cubicle space, you can make it work.
Especially when once the point of surface is there. I think it gives us a lot more freedom to reprogram spaces that might have open workstations and private areas and other things. It's just not feasible with the current structure the way it is. So I think the point of service might give us ways to reclaim space and have a better work environment. But you can't have that and then have people wandering through those cubicles and other things. And so, and it's sort of like the detective space. Since it's secure, you go down there and it's a much different space than what you see in other parts of the building because the public doesn't have access to it. And I think, so we're really open to that and really looking at what the long-term needs might be.
And if you get rid of those big wide corridors, you know, so much can be done with furniture panel systems.
Yeah.
That are flexible.
So the committee should know that, for me, these interviews have been wonderful because the staff is actually very cooperative with all of these ideas. No one is really clinging to space and saying, boy, we've been doing it this way all this time, we don't want to change. I was surprised at the level of cooperation and even the adjacencies. We need to be close to this team and close to this team. It was a very positive, these have all been very positive interviews. They've been good.
Joe, were you happy?
Was I happy?
Are you
Very.
happy?
Am I happy right now?
Yes.
I'm so happy.
Well, that's why
Absolutely.
he's reacting to you.
Come on me.
We should,
Part of the next steps and then the next meetings, right now, there are meetings still on the calendar. But what seems to help is giving JSA some time to work through things, get some more materials together. So I think right now, there is a December 10th still scheduled, but in the meantime, there's a November 12th and November 26th that I don't think gives us enough time to come back with additional substance for the committee. So I wanted to make sure we knew when the next meeting was, and we'll add that to the agenda as a sort of standing item. Do you want to keep the 10th or look for
December 10th, you said?
December 10th?
Perhaps we pull that in a week and kill the 26th.
You could
Meaning it
do
would be 4 weeks from today, and we would remove the meeting the day before the Thanksgiving, before
So
Thanksgiving
there's
on
two
the
you have to
26th.
remove, there's two you have to remove, the
Yeah,
12th and the
November.
26th. And we just left them on there because we didn't have direction to pull those
Sure.
off.
I think we have to give
The 3rd of the
this
10th.
process, the architects, time to
Yep.
come back with meaningful stuff.
Would December 3rd, 4 weeks, be enough time to have some progress?
This is from
So not jump at once.
JSA say, what do they need?
No, we gotta finish our
Considering.
staff interviews. It would be great to have, and I'm looking at these guys. If we have the staff interviews kind of wrapped up, we can start test fitting different spaces. And we could share the initial design thinking in a month's time.
And
That seems like a reasonable next step.
and the 10th is already on the schedule, and when we think about it, we try to get you, we're really putting the packet together the week before and try to get that the Friday before. So a little extra time gives us really the 4 weeks of work, and then we pull the
Yeah,
packet
that's
together for
good.
the work. The 10th is already there.
Sure.
This was the same rhythm we had the last time, and I think it gave us ability to give you some substance at the meetings too. Which we're trying to make sure that the time here is valuable.
Yeah, it makes the meetings longer.
I'll agree with what you said, except when we get to January, we're gonna have to meet more than once a month.
I think it depends on the rhythm of what JSA has to deliver as well. And that's part of what we're trying to make sure, what we wanna do is we don't wanna,
I think
We're trying to
calendaring
give you
meetings
substance.
for the year in advance is a bad idea. I agree with what you're saying.
and
And we
we'll be able
should,
to
we
tell you
should
what
have
each
this
one-
conversation as an agenda item every meeting. What are the next steps? Who wants what deliverables? And let's calendar a meeting based on what we all agree makes sense. So let's just keep going with that.
I think with the holidays, there's a challenge around that Thanksgiving holiday always, and so I think it helps to have a little bit of extra time to come in on the 10th, because we're not going to end up having another meeting in December, because that would fall on the 24th, it's not gonna happen.
So cancel the 12th, cancel the 26th, and keep December 10th.
Go for December
Is that the
10th. Yeah.
December 10th, yeah.
December 10th.
Everybody agree?
You wanna be here on New Year's Eve, Kate?
Definitely not.
So, public comments still?
Yes, we need to open it up.
Can
for
I
public.
have, just request at the December 10th meeting, any of the questions that the members of the committee have submitted, that we get some answers back to those questions?
That's our goal, like we did in this was, if there are questions that didn't get resolved, we try to put that together in the next packet for you.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So if you have questions that you feel like haven't been resolved, please submit them.
I already
Okay.
submitted a
Those
list
were-
of questions.
Yeah, there were the questions that were, it was what, probably 2 meetings ago, and a lot of those ones I think are gonna be appropriate to answer properly when we're laying out.
All right,
That's-
December 10th I'd like that on the agenda with the answers to those questions. And if it can't be answered,
What he's saying is they can start
you
the
again.
answer.
Acknowledge me again.
Yes, we can do that.
Okay. All right, and public comment, because I know we had a few people. Come on up. There's 2 spots here that are.
Yeah, hi, I'm Susan Sterry, and I don't know JSA, but you guys all know who I am. I just want clarification, so I've gone back and read minutes and reviewed the reports, and I also watched the last 2 meetings that you had, so I was glad that I could actually follow a lot of what you were talking about, and you answered some of my questions. So the next step is you're gonna finish the report, interviewing everybody, for the city side. And then, I heard you say at the end about start laying out the project,
Well, test fitting,
the test fittings.
yeah.
And then that comes back here to the committee, obviously, and then it would be like a work study, a work program where that you guys would all look at it. Would that include other, well, I guess you two right there. I'm just wondering how, if this committee decides, oh, this is great layout, well, we think that works and everything, then does the employees of the city and everything get a chance to look at it, to have more input? Or is that too far into it?
the process we're in now is that we've had initial discussions. And that starts to inform how we lay out spaces.
I get that.
That still will go back to those different groups. So they'll be seeing what we're doing. So it's an iterative process.
So it comes here and then
Yeah.
it goes
Yeah,
back?
we're never in a
Okay.
vacuum.
No, because
No, I was just curious if it was gonna be the reverse, if it went back to the employees first and then comes here, so it doesn't make any difference, I just wanted.
Well, and this is even, a step on the ladder, not,
Oh, no, I know.
There's a lot of,
No, I know that, yeah.
it's likely that it's all kind of happening concurrently. We will go back and forth and meet with everyone, because we never want to design a space that's not going to work for the operational needs of the department. There will be decisions ultimately that have to be made by the city, but it's,
No, I
we never
understand.
work in a vacuum, or at least we never choose to work in a
No,
vacuum.
I just wanted to clarify in my own mind what the procedure is going forward. Nope, thank you.
That's great.
Thank you. Come on up.
Bob Coran, and I just had a couple of issues I want to clarify. The first was on the firing range. comparing the two reports, and this was I think the matrix report at 4,160 square feet. I'm on page 8. And I think the other report was something like 2,383 square feet.
Correct.
And so it's a 17, almost an 1,800 square foot difference. And I was wondering why, what?
The matrix report was based on building a new facility, and so that's what they would recommend for a new firing range, essentially. The decision that has been made to date is that the existing firing range in this building is going to remain, be reused. There might be some renovations and upgrades to it, but ultimately it's staying within its
Space-wise, it was
bubble.
adequate.
Right, so that's where that number came from. If we were saying we would do a new one, it would be different, but we said that's something we're sort of
Right. The next thing was and I can't attribute it, I don't recall which candidate. One of the candidates mentioned the possibility of whether the part of the dispatch center could be transformed to space at the fire station on Lafayette. And I didn't know whether that, had any merit to it, whether it was considered, what the chief felt about that.
Yeah, our dispatch center is part of our integral working day-to-day
Right.
operations for shift commanders who could walk in there when something's going on. Their command post is that they go into the dispatch center. So there's a possibility, I mean, in some instances where the dispatch center is off-site and that works, but that would definitely have a dramatic change in how we do business. And then the space over at Fire Station 2 is not big enough to function as a regular.
So that doesn't have any particular merit in terms of functionality.
I'm not gonna say it doesn't have merit, but it would be significant cost to move dispatch over there.
Okay, thank you. I just
It
wanted
was
to
a valid
clarify.
question, but
Yeah, no, and we haven't had those discussions even.
Yeah.
But that is the redundant,
That's our backup dispatch center. If something were to happen critically
Yeah.
here, we'd move over there as a temporary
Great,
space,
thank you.
which we have to have.
Talking about the fire range, do you use it every day?
It doesn't get used every day, but it's open to be used every day, so
And do you have to use it here, or do you have a relationship with SIG or Wilcox?
we have our own, so we have full access to it anytime we wanna use it.
There's
SIG,
no reason to have a new ones, like you were speaking, the big one, we can continue with the one that we have here.
well, if we were gonna build a standalone station, then we'd wanna have a range in that station, but with what we're looking to do here, a range is expensive to build.
Yeah.
So, in the whole feasibility, the current space that we have is one of the spaces in this building that actually has been renovated because we had a fire down there, was the range, so we could continue to use that. Like we said, we'd make some upgrades to it, but in this whole project of if we were to stay in this building, the feasibility of building a new range would blow the budget.
that was
The walls in there or something?
I'm gonna stick talking to you about toilets.
Thanks, everybody.
I get it, I did some renovations at one of the buildings.